So it's time to get our components positioned on the PCB. There is a saying that PCB design is 90% placement and 10% routing. Now, while you could argue about the percentage of each, it is generally accepted that good component placement is critical for good board design. Keep in mind that you may need to tune the placement as you route as well. So first we'll go ahead and get the components positioned. First thing we want to do obviously is get our zoom level in a place where we're comfortable. Again, Control and the mouse wheel can zoom in and out, as well as page up and page down. We can also right click and go to View, View Area, and drag a box around where we actually want to see. The components will be positioned on the current snap grid. For a simple design such as this, there are no specific design requirements that dictate what placement grid should be used. As the designer, you decide what a suitable placement grid would be. To simplify the process of positioning the components, you can work with a coarse placement grid, for example, 1 millimeter. So let's go ahead and confirm that the snap grid is set to 1 millimeter on the Home tab of the ribbon. The components in the tutorial can be placed as shown in the provided image, and of course you can follow along with the placement with me. To place connector Y1, we're just going to position our cursor over the middle of the outline of the connector, and then click and hold with the left mouse button. The cursor will change to the crosshair and jump to the nearest reference point for the part. While continuing to hold down the mouse button, move the mouse and drag the component. We'll go ahead and position this towards the left-hand side of the board, ensuring obviously that the whole of the component stays within the board boundary. And when the connector component is in position, we simply let go of the mouse button to drop it into place. And note how the connection lines drag and re-optimize with the component movement. For the next component, we're going to try using the Move Component command. This can be done in two ways, so we'll go ahead and try them both. Go to the Tools tab and access the Move pull-down and select Component from this list. This will change your cursor to a command crosshair. If you left click on a component, you will pick it up and move it with your cursor. We can move it into position using spacebar to rotate if needed, and then we left click a second time to place it. And notice that you still have a command crosshair available, indicating that you're still in the Move Component command. Go ahead and grab Q1 and move it up here. And again, we are still in the Move Component command. And then left click again. To exit out of this command, we would right click. We're not actually going to do this now because we do want to use a different way of using this particular command. So instead of clicking where a component exists, we just want to click anywhere a component does not exist. This will bring up the Choose Component dialog. The default is to jump to component. I prefer the Move Component to Cursor, so let's go ahead and set that if yours is not already set to that. This mode is very useful when you know the designator of the part you wish to place and you are already in the general area on the PCB where you wish to place the component. Let's go ahead and just go up here and we'll type C1 into the field at the top of the dialog and then press enter. C1 will snap to your cursor at the current location, and then you can position and place it as before. After placing C1, you will again be left with the command crosshair. Go ahead and click again into a space that has no components. Note that it remembers that you are in Move Component to Cursor mode and that you are automatically highlighted on the top field. And so now we can very quickly type in designators that we want, pull these parts to our current location, and we're going to go ahead and use this to place C2. And we have Q1 and Q2 already placed. Let's go ahead and look at another method of component placement using the PCB panel. So we're going to go to the View tab, and if the PCB panel is not already open, we can use this to get it open. We're going to go ahead and click on this, and we're going to set it to Components mode. This will bring our PCB panel forward while also setting the mode of the panel to Components. On this panel, we want to go ahead and sort by designator. And we're going to locate R1 through R4. We can use Shift or Control to multi-select these parts. And then within the PCB editor, zoom to the location where we want to place these parts, and then right-click on one of the selected parts in the PCB panel and invoke the command Reposition Components. This mode will queue up all selected parts for placement and will pull them to your cursor in turn until all parts are placed or skipped. The right click will skip a part, and left click will place the component currently held on your cursor and immediately bring the next part onto your cursor for placement. So let's go ahead and place all 4 resistors near the bottom of the PCB. Finish the rough positioning of your components using the image here, or just follow along with what I'm doing. Remember, the space bar will rotate in increments of 90 degrees anti-clockwise as you drag them, and so we can see the connection lines are shown. And then let's go ahead and get these parts in position. Don't worry about the positioning being exact. We'll go ahead and use a quick alignment later. If you need to reposition component text, this can be done in a similar fashion. Simply click and drag the text and press the space bar to rotate it if any of that needs to be adjusted. The PCB editor also includes powerful interactive placement tools. So let's use the alignment tools to ensure that our 4 resistors are correctly aligned and spaced. We can either hold the Shift key and click on each of these in turn to get them selected, or simply drag a selection box around them all. Right-click on any of the selected parts and go to the Align menu, and then access the Align command. And we want to select horizontal space equally and bottom on the vertical, and then click OK. The 4 resistors are now aligned with the lowest component and equally spaced. If we click anywhere else within the design window, we will deselect all the resistors, and if required, you can also align capacitors and transistors, although this likely is not required since we do have a coarse snap grid at the moment. As well, even with those resistors, we easily could have aligned those with a good 1 millimeter snap grid. Just going to make some final adjustments to these parts to get the rotations correct for routing. And we can see here, because I moved the designator text for this part, that the auto position was disabled. So I'm just going to go ahead and set that again to be center above. And we'll rotate that back around. And one more time, center above. And that'll just make sure it stays in position if we decide we want to move the parts again later. So with everything positioned, it is now time to do some routing.